I grew up believing my father was dead. My mother told me he had died in a fire when I was 2 years old. And from that moment on, she never spoke his name again. Not once. For 25 years, I carried that silence like a scar I could never see, but always felt. Then last month, everything changed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. It started with something ordinary, almost forgettable. I donated blood at a mobile clinic parked outside a grocery store in Austin, Texas. I thought I was doing a small good deed. A week later, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, but carried a weight I couldn't ignore. They told me my results had flagged an anomaly. Instead of giving me a medical explanation, they gave me an address in New York and told me I needed to go there. I couldn't understand why. I had never been to New York. I had no family there, no friends. But something in their tone left me no choice. So I bought a ticket. I boarded the plane with nothing but a backpack and questions I didn't know how to ask. And when I finally stood in front of the door at that address, I had no idea my life was about to be torn wide open. The door swung open, and a man stood there with a mug of coffee in his hand, his eyes locked on mine. The mug slipped, shattered on the floor, and for a moment, the world went silent. He stared at me as if he'd seen a ghost, his lips trembling before he whispered one word. My name is Miles Rowe, and for most of my life, I lived with the silence that shaped everything about me. I was raised in Austin, Texas, by my mother, Clara Rowe. She is a strong woman, the kind of person who never lets life crush her spirit, no matter how hard it tries. She worked as a nurse, long shifts that left her tired but never bitter. She carried herself with quiet determination. And though she gave me love and stability, she also gave me walls that I was never allowed to climb. Those walls were built around my father. From as far back as I can remember, he was a shadow. My mother told me he had died in a fire when I was 2 years old. That was it. No photos on the shelves, no stories at bedtime, no letters tucked away in boxes, just the flat finality of death. The way she said it made me believe the conversation was closed forever. As a child, I learned not to ask. As a teenager, I grew angry at the silence, but found no answers. And as an adult, I carried the weight of that missing piece of myself in silence because I thought pressing her would only wound her more. Our small apartment in Austin was warm but sparse. Mom worked hard to make sure I never felt poor, but I noticed how careful she was with money. The furniture was practical, the meals simple, and every choice she made carried the quiet discipline of someone who knew what it meant to go without. Despite that, she never let me feel unloved. She made every birthday special, every Christmas meaningful, even if the gifts were modest. She was my anchor, and I never doubted that she loved me fiercely. But love is complicated when it is tied to secrets. Growing up, I looked for reflections of myself in her, because I had no idea what half of me even was. She had my same dark hair and brown eyes, but there were moments when I would catch my reflection in the mirror and wonder what parts of me came from him. Did he laugh like me? Did he have the same restless energy that made me fix things that were not even broken just to keep my hands busy? Those questions built a hunger inside me when I tried to bury under school, friends, and eventually work. By 27, I had built a life that looked steady from the outside. I worked as a mechanic in a small auto shop on the edge of the city. I was good at it, not just because I understood cars, but because I liked the order of it. Machines made sense. If something broke, there was always a reason, always a fix. People were not like that. Families were not like that. Still, the silence about my father hung over me. It colored my relationships with friends who spoke casually about their dads, about fishing trips or arguments or lessons learned. It made me feel different in ways I could never fully explain. I dated, but never committed. How could I imagine being a father when half of me was built on ashes and unanswered questions? One night when I was 20, I tried again to press my mother. I remember sitting at the kitchen table after she got home from work. She looked exhausted, still in her scrubs, her hair pulled back tight. I asked her directly, "Why don't we have any photos of Dad?" She froze for a moment. Her eyes flickered with something I cannot place. Maybe fear or maybe grief. Then she turned back to her dinner, her voice quiet but firm. Some things are better left in the past, Miles. The way she said it told me the subject was closed. But the look in her eyes that night stayed with me. It was not just grief. It was something heavier, a shadow she carried alone. I let it go, but the questions never left me. They sat in the back of my mind like sparks waiting for fuel. Despite that, my mother and I were close. She laughed easily when she let her guard down, and she had a warmth that made people trust her. I admired her strength, but sometimes I caught her staring at me, and it felt like she was seeing someone else. Like in my face, she saw not just her son, but a reminder of a man she could not bear to speak of. I tried to fill the silence with my own story. I worked hard, built a routine, and carved out a life that felt steady. I had friends who teased me for always being the responsible one. I had coworkers who trusted me with the hardest jobs in the shop. On the surface, I was fine, but deep down I felt incomplete. I told myself it did not matter that my father was gone and nothing would change that. But the truth is I wanted to know who he was. I wanted to know what kind of man could leave such an absence behind, whether by death or choice. I never imagined the way truth would find me. Looking back now, I can see how the silence prepared me for the moment everything unraveled. For years, my life had been defined by not knowing. That empty space shaped me more than any story ever could. And when the call came from that clinic, when a stranger handed me an address instead of an explanation, it felt like the first crack in the wall my mother had built. I did not know it yet, but that crack was about to tear my life wide open. The day that set everything in motion began like any other. It was a Saturday, and I had the weekend off in the shop. I went grocery shopping in the morning, and as I loaded bags into my car, I noticed a mobile blood donation clinic set up in the parking lot. Their red banner stretched across the side of the white bus, and a volunteer stood outside handing out pamphlets. He smiled at me and said, 15 minutes of your time can save a life. I had never donated blood before. Part of me wanted to brush it off and get home, but something tugged at me. Maybe it was guilt for never giving back. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was that gnawing hunger inside me to feel like I belonged to something bigger. I nodded, signed the forms, and climbed aboard the bus. The nurses were kind, joking lightly to put donors at ease. I sat in the chair, rolled up my sleeve, and tried to ignore the needle. It was simple, quick, ordinary. I left with a sticker that said, "I gave blood today," and a free cookie. I thought that was the end of it. A week later, while I was tightening bolts under the hood of pickup at work, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. Mr. Rowe, the voice on the other end, was professional, calm, but not casual. "This is Dr. Stevens from the Texas Regional Blood Center. I'm calling regarding your donation." My stomach tightened. I thought maybe I was sick. Maybe they had found something in my blood that spelled trouble. My mind raced ahead of the conversation. "Your results flagged an anomaly," he said. "Nothing immediately dangerous to you, but significant. We recommend you come in to discuss it further." "What kind of anomaly?" I asked. There was a pause. The kind of pause that tells you someone is choosing their words carefully. "Mr. Rowe, I can't explain over the phone. What I can do is provide you with an address in New York. If you're willing, I think you'll find answers there." "An address?" I said, confused. "I don't know anyone in New York. Why would I go there?" "Because the anomaly relates to your family history," he said. "That's all I can tell you. It is important." He gave me the address. I scribbled it on the back of a receipt. My hands were shaking. That night, I sat across from my mother at our kitchen table. I wanted to ask her to demand the truth, but when I looked at her tired face and saw the shadows in her eyes, I couldn't. I was afraid of what she might say, and maybe more afraid of what she wouldn't. Instead, I pushed the paper into my pocket and stayed silent. But the questions consumed me for days. I could not focus at work. I replayed the doctor's words, his calm insistence that the answers were waiting for me in New York. My coworkers noticed I was distracted, fumbling tools, forgetting steps. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining every possibility. Was it a medical condition? A hidden relative? Did I have family out there who had been searching for me? Finally, I broke. I pulled the paper from my pocket, stared at the address again, and knew I had to go. Before I left, I called my mother. I wanted to give her one last chance to tell me the truth. She answered on the third ring, her voice weary. "Mom, I need to know," I said. "I need to know about Dad." I got a call from the clinic. They gave me an address in New York. Silence. For a long moment, I thought the line had gone dead. Then she spoke, her voice tight with fear. "Miles, please don't go. Some doors should stay closed." Her words hit me like a hammer. The same words she had used years ago when I asked about photos of my father. The same tone that had walled me off from the truth my whole life. I clenched the phone tighter. "That's exactly why I have to go, Mom. I can't live in silence anymore. I can't keep pretending half of me never existed." She started to cry, soft but sharp. "You don't understand. I did everything to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I demanded. Her sobs grew louder, but no answers came. I could feel the wall between us rising higher. In that moment, I realized she was never going to tell me. Whatever truth she carried was too heavy for her to set down. So I made the choice for both of us. I booked a last-minute flight to New York. I packed light. Only a backpack with a few clothes, my wallet, and the piece of paper with the address that burned in my pocket like a live coal. I did not tell anyone else where I was going. The truth was mine to uncover. As the plane lifted off the runway, my heart pounded with fear and anticipation. I looked out the window at the shrinking lights of Texas and felt the weight of leaving behind everything I knew. Ahead of me was nothing but questions and the hope that someone in New York could answer them. The conflict was no longer just about my father. It was about my identity. My life had been built on silence and secrets, and I was finally ready to break them open. Whatever waited for me on the other side of that address, I knew I could not turn back. The decision to go to New York was not made in one moment of clarity. It built over days of restlessness, a steady storm growing inside me. Every time I tried to focus at the shop, the address burned in my pocket. Every night when I sat at the kitchen table with my mother, I saw the lines of fear in her face and knew she would never open the door to the truth. If I wanted answers, I had to open it myself. The morning I bought the ticket, I felt like I was standing on a cliff edge. My finger hovered over the purchase button, and my mind screamed at me to stop. New York was far. I had no family there, no plan, no idea what kind of truth I was chasing. But silence had been my life for 25 years, and I could not live inside it anymore. I pressed the button, and the confirmation email hit my inbox like a strike of finality. That night, I packed. The act itself felt surreal. I rolled clothes into my backpack, slipped in my toothbrush, my phone charger, and the address folded tight inside my wallet. Every item I packed carried the weight of a journey I could not yet define. I stopped halfway, sitting on my bed, staring at the walls of my room. They were bare, except for a few old posters and a photo of me and my mother on my high school graduation day. She was smiling, proud, her arm wrapped tightly around me. I wondered if she knew this day was coming, the day her silence would no longer hold me. I did not sleep much. My thoughts spun through every possibility. Was the address a hospital, a research center, a distant relative who knew something about my father? Fear and curiosity pulled me in opposite directions until morning arrived. At dawn, I wheeled my backpack to the kitchen where my mother stood in her robe, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Her eyes were red. She had not slept either. "Miles," she said, her voice breaking. Please don't go." "I have to," I answered. My voice was steady, but inside I was shaking. She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "You don't understand what you're walking into." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me what I'm walking into." Her hand dropped. Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. "I can't." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. For the first time, I realized how much of our love was built on things unsaid, and how fragile that love felt now that I was breaking the rules. I kissed her cheek, whispered that I loved her, and walked out the door. She did not try to stop me again. The airport was crowded, but I moved through it in a haze. The world felt both ordinary and unreal. People bustled with suitcases. Families hugged goodbye. Announcements echoed overhead. But for me, every step was a march towards something life-altering. When I sat by the window of the plane, I gripped the armrest as the engines roared and thought about how much could change by the time I landed. The flight itself was long, filled with the dull hum of the cabin and the chatter of strangers. I pulled out the address and stared at it again. 48 Mercer Street, Brooklyn. I searched the name of the street on my phone, but it gave me nothing special, just a regular street in a regular neighborhood. That unsettled me more than if it had been tied to a hospital or clinic. Whatever was waiting for me was not official. It was personal. As the plane cut through the clouds, I imagined the man my mother never spoke of. I pictured a dozen versions of him, a kind man with gentle eyes, a violent man she had needed to escape, a weak man who had abandoned us. Each version felt possible. Each one changed who I was. The not knowing hollowed me out, but it also pushed me forward. When the plane touched down at LaGuardia, the city stretched out like a living giant. Towers of glass and steel, rivers of yellow cabs, streets packed with people who all seemed to be in a hurry. I felt like an outsider in a place too fast, too loud. But the address was still in my pocket, demanding that I move. I checked into a cheap hotel in Brooklyn, the kind where the sheets smelled faintly of bleach and the walls were thin enough to hear your neighbor's television. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, debating whether to call my mother again, but I already knew what she would say. She would beg me to come home. She would remind me that some doors should stay closed, and I would tell her I was going to open it anyway. So I didn't call. The next morning, I stood outside the hotel, clutching a piece of paper with the directions scribbled in my handwriting. My hands were clammy, my chest was tight. I had never been so afraid and so determined at the same time. I walked the streets until I reached Mercer. It was quiet, lined with brick buildings and small shops. Not the kind of place that seemed like it would hold secrets that could upend a life. I stood across the street from number 48 for nearly 10 minutes, staring at the door. Ordinary brown wood, brass numbers nailed crookedly above it. But to me, it was the heaviest door in the world. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn around, go back to Texas, pretend this never happened. But then I thought of the years I had lived without a father, the questions I had swallowed, the silence that had defined me. I thought of my mother's voice begging me not to go, and I realized that if I walked away now, I would never forgive myself. So I crossed the street. I climbed the steps. I raised my fist and knocked. The decision was made. The door would open, and whatever waited on the other side would change everything. My heart hammered as I stood on the steps of number 48, Mercer Street. The cold brass numbers above the door seemed to glare down at me, reminding me of the years of silence I had carried. I raised my fist and knocked, each rap echoing louder in my chest than in the hallway. For a moment, nothing happened. I nearly turned and walked away, convinced this had been a mistake. Then I heard footsteps. The door opened, and a man stood in the doorway holding a coffee mug. His hair was strewn with gray, his shoulders broad but slightly stooped, and his face lined with years that looked hard-lived. His eyes, though, what stopped me cold. They were the same shade of brown as mine. The mug slipped from his hand and shattered against the concrete. He stared at me, his mouth open, his lips trembling. Miles! His voice cracked on my name. The world tilted. He knew my name. He knew me. I could barely breathe. Yes, I said, my voice raw. I'm Miles. The man's face went pale. He pressed a hand to the doorframe, as if the weight of the moment was too much to bear. Tears welled in his eyes, and he whispered again, softer this time, almost to himself. My son. I felt my knees weaken, my chest filled with a surge of anger and longing, colliding all at once. I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. The man who was supposed to be dead was standing in front of me, alive. You're supposed to be dead, I blurted out, his face twisted with grief. He stepped aside and motioned me in. Please come inside. Let me explain. I hesitated, my fists clenched. Every instinct screamed to demand answers right there. But something in his eyes, shame, desperation, love, pulled me across the threshold. The apartment was small, cluttered with books, papers, and the faint smell of stale coffee. I sat on a worn couch while he lowered himself into the chair across from me. For a long time, he just stared at me, tears running down his cheeks. I'm Charles Hale, he said finally. I'm your father. The words landed heavy. I wanted to shout that I already knew that. The blood in my veins had screamed at the moment I saw his face. But I let him continue. I didn't die in that fire. I survived, but surviving wasn't the end of it. Back then, I was tangled in things I should never have been part of. Dangerous people, debts, threats that reached into our home. The fire was no accident. It was meant to kill me, and when it didn't, I realized staying would put both you and your mother in danger. So I left. I disappeared to keep you safe. My stomach churned. His words felt both like a lifeline and a betrayal. I thought of my mother working endless shifts to raise me alone, carrying the silence all these years. I thought of birthdays without him, nights staring at the ceiling, wondering who I was. You let me grow up thinking you were dead, I said, my voice sharp. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it did to her? Charles bowed his head. Every day, not a single day passed that I didn't think about you. But if I came back, they would have found you. I had to make a choice, Miles, and I chose to protect you, even if it meant you would hate me. The anger in me boiled over. You could have told me the truth when I was older. You could have sent a letter, anything. Instead, I grew up with nothing. Do you know how many times I asked Mom about you? Do you know how many times she cried and told me some things are better left in the past? His shoulders shook, and for the first time, I saw how broken he looked. Not the image of a strong father I had once imagined, but a man who had lived in exile from his own family, carrying the weight of his choices. You're right, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I failed you. I failed both of you, but I am here now, and I will answer every question. If you want to walk away after that, I won't stop you. But please let me tell you everything. I sat back, my hands trembling. The fury inside me did not vanish, but beneath it, something unexpected stirred. The boy who had grown up searching for half of himself felt that missing piece flicker into view. It did not erase the pain, but it gave me something I had never had before. Truth. Charles leaned forward, his voice steadier now. Miles, I never stopped loving you. Every sacrifice I made was for you. And seeing you here alive, grown strong, it is more than I ever thought I'd be allowed. I wanted to resist, to hold on to the anger that had fueled me all these years. But I also wanted to believe him. For the first time in my life, I had the chance to look into the eyes of the man who had given me half of who I was. We sat in silence, two men bound by blood and years of absence, the air thick with pain and possibility. For the first time in 25 years, the silence between father and son had been broken, and in its place was a truth that would change everything. When I left Charles's apartment that night, the city lights blurred into streaks as I walked. My body felt heavy, like every step carried the weight of 25 years of silence. The streets buzzed with the life of New York, but inside me there was only stillness. I had met my father. He was alive. He had not been a ghost or a cruel absence. He was a man, broken and flawed, but still mine. Back at the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to put the pieces together. I wanted to hate him. Part of me still did. But another part, the part that had grown up searching for his face in the mirror, wanted to believe him. His story of danger and sacrifice did not erase the pain he caused, but explained it. And for the first time in my life, I had answers instead of shadows. The next morning, I called my mother. My voice shook as I told her where I'd been. Mom, I met him, I said. I met Dad. He's alive. There was a long silence on the line. Then I heard her sob, raw and unguarded. I knew this day would come, she whispered. You knew he was alive, I said, my chest tightening. Yes, she admitted. He begged me to keep you safe. He swore that if he stayed away, they would never find us. And I believed him. I kept his secret because I thought it was the only way you would grow up free. Her words cut deep. I thought of her working long shifts, raising me alone, carrying the burden of silence. I thought of the nights she held me when I cried and the times she turned away when I asked about him. She had carried that weight alone for decades, and I saw now that it had broken something inside her, too. You could have told me, I said, my voice softer than I expected. You didn't have to let me believe he was dead. Her sobs quieted. I thought the lie would hurt less than the truth. I thought if you hated him, you wouldn't go searching for him. I thought I was protecting you. I closed my eyes. The anger I had carried against her began to shift. She had not lied out of cruelty. She had lied out of fear and love. It did not make it right, but it made it human. When I returned to Texas, our house felt smaller than before, as though the truth had crowded into every corner. My mother and I sat at the kitchen table one evening, the same place we had fought over questions she refused to answer. This time, there was no silence. He told me everything, I said, about the fire, about the danger, about why he stayed away. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. And do you believe him? I hesitated, then answered honestly. I want to. I think I do. But believing him doesn't erase the years he missed. It doesn't erase the pain. She looked at me with tired eyes. I never wanted you to carry that pain. I thought I was sparing you. I reached across the table and took her hand. You gave me everything you could, Mom. I see that now. But I needed the truth. Even if it hurt, I needed it. She broke then, tears spilling down her cheeks. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side, not separated by walls of silence and secrets. Over the weeks that followed, I spoke to Charles on the phone. At first, it was awkward, like talking to a stranger whose face looked like mine. But slowly stories began to spill out. He told me about his childhood, about the mistakes he made, about the fire that nearly took his life. He told me about the years of exile, the jobs he worked under false names, the constant fear that someone would connect him back to us. One evening, I asked him a question that had haunted me for years. Did you ever think about coming back, even when it wasn't safe? His voice cracked. Every day, I watched from a distance when I could. I saw your school photos through people I trusted. I saw you grow from a boy into a man, and it tore me apart not to be there. But I told myself that if you lived free of my mistakes, it was worth it. I just never imagined you'd come knocking on my door one day. His honesty did not erase the years, but it began to stitch something inside me. For the first time, I felt like I could move forward, not as half a person, but as someone who had the whole truth. The lesson was not neat. It was not simple forgiveness or perfect reconciliation. It was messy, raw, and real. I learned that love can wound when it is twisted by fear. I learned that silence can protect, but also destroy. And I learned that sometimes the truth is not a clean answer, but a jagged edge you have to learn to live with. One night, as I sat alone in my room, I looked at the photo of my mother and me at my graduation. For years, I had wondered what my father would have looked like in that picture. Now I knew, and though I could never reclaim the lost years, I could carry both of them with me. The mother who protected me with silence, and the father who sacrificed presence for safety. The story I grew up believing had been a lie, but the truth I found was more powerful. I was no longer a boy defined by absence. I was a man who had faced the silence, broken it open, and found himself in the pieces. When I share this story, it is not to condemn or to glorify. It is to remind anyone listening that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that sets you free. That is my story. For 25 years, I lived under the weight of silence, believing my father had died in a fire. What I found was not just a man, but the truth that had been hidden from me all my life. It was painful, complicated, and messy, but it gave me something I had never had before. Answers. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family, or if it reminded you that truth, no matter how hard, is always worth chasing, then I hope you'll take a moment to support this channel. Like the video if it spoke to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and most importantly, comment below. I would love to know how this story made you feel, and if you've ever carried a secret or a silence in your family that shaped who you are. And if you want more stories like this, real stories about life, loss, truth, and the moments that change everything, then make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Thank you for listening to my story.